Good evening to you. May I tell you how happy I am to be at Willette. This is something I've been looking forward to for some time, and I had a nice meal tonight with the Whitakers, and you already know this, but I just want to say that this church is so blessed to have a family like theirs, to be here and to work with you, and I know that you love and appreciate them. I don't know how well you can see that, but it won't matter. I want to talk about rearing kids tonight. You know, once in a while I'll be in an assembly and some speaker will make a remark about preachers who talk about raising kids, and they'll make a joke about it, before I had kids, I used to talk about how to raise kids, and then I had mine, and I realized I didn't know anything at all about raising kids. Well, I don't appreciate that humor. I understand the fact that we are, as parents, a lot of what we do is on-the-job training. I understand that because every child is different. I have two of them, and I can tell you they're very, very different people. So I understand that we have to custom fit our parenting. And I believe that there are some principles that ought to be applicable, and we just make a terrible mistake, those of us who are older, to not talk about child rearing, to treat it like there just aren't any bedrock principles that we ought to learn or teach the young parents coming up. So I want to spend our time tonight, with your permission, talking about raising Christian kids. I read in a book one time that you and I do not have enough human ingenuity to build a successful home without the Lord. You believe that? Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, and what is a city but a collection of homes? Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman wakes but in vain. It's vain for you to rise up early and stay up late to eat the bread of sorrows. I know a lot of families like that. For so he gives his beloved sleep. Lo, children are an heritage of the Lord. The fruit of the womb is his reward. As arrows are in the hands of a mighty man, so are children of the youth. Happy is that man who has his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate. I do not know where my children will go in life, and perhaps they will go places I've never been before, but I've shot them at the devil, you know. I raised them up. Mrs. Colley and I did. And they're going to live their lives telling other people about Jesus Christ. And I'm very thankful for that. Let's talk about some principles. I'm going to show you 4 matters tonight in the time that we have allotted. 4 matters which I consider to be very important in raising our children. Now, before we start the list, I want everybody in this room, parents and grandparents alike, to be able to say what your goal is plainly with the rearing of your kids, or you're helping in the rearing of your grandkids. What would you say is the goal? What is it that you want to produce? There is but one definition of true success. Everything else pales to insignificance besides this. True success is living your life and going to heaven. True failure, no matter what else might be true, is living your life and going to hell. Is that a true statement? Now, in the rearing of our kids, here's the goal. I want to raise happy, faithful, productive Christians. That's it. And sometimes, and I don't want to put salt in anybody's wound, but sometimes we'll raise our kids, and you ever talk to someone and you say, well, how's your son doing? And he's grown, oh, he's doing so good. He's got that job, graduated, got a big job, making lots of money, built the big house, he and his wife, and they got a couple of kids, and those kids are involved in everything. And, oh, they're just having a great life. How about the church? Are they faithful to the Lord? Well, there is that one thing. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not one thing. That's the thing. And if we're going to rear our children, it's got to be you ought to be able to say this in your sleep. What's your goal in raising your kids? My goal is to raise happy, faithful, productive Christians. Now, if you share that goal, you're going to find this lesson interesting. Number 1, matters of knowledge. Matters of knowledge. Fathers, don't provoke your children to wrath, Ephesians 6:4, but bring them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. I understand the fact that we bring our children to Bible class and worship, and I'm going to talk some more about that in a couple of minutes. But what I want you to understand is that parents, the primary responsibility of training our children in the Lord belongs to us. Whatever they get, I grew up in the church, and frankly, sometimes as children, as a child, our Bible classes were better. Some years were weaker, and I think a lot of that was because some of those years we were pretty rowdy. elementary school and junior high and all that. And I'm sure we gave those teachers a hard time, but whatever your kids get from Bible classes, I want you to see that as just being extra on their spiritual education. You say, I'm going to make sure that my kids get an academic, secular education. Well, that's a good thing. But what they get spiritually ought to be just as equal or more. Are we doing that? Are we doing that? You say, well, I think so. I mean, I would say to you that we need to make some deliberate decisions. May I make a suggestion? I know there's lots of things, don't have a lot of time, but if there was one thing I could point to that I believe will make a difference in the spiritual education of your children, I would say it's this. You need to have a family Bible time at night. It needs to be something that you do, no pun intended, religiously. Now, I understand that we're all busy, and some parents prefer to do this morning time. Most prefer to do it at night before you put your kids to bed. And it's the best. The best is when Dad is the one who leads it. The father calls it. It's time for, we call it, at my house, we called it story time. One of our deacons at West Huntsville is Nathan Anderson. Nathan was a child in Salem, Virginia when I preached there. And then later on he went to Freed-Hardeman, and then later on he moved to Huntsville to work, and he married a lovely young woman, and they have a couple of kids now. But we knew him all through his growing up, and he came to our house as a teenager one time. And we had our family Bible time, and he was talking to Hannah, our daughter, privately, and he said, Hannah, ever since I've known you, whenever I've come to visit, y'all have had story time at night, Bible time at night. Do y'all do that every time somebody comes to your house? She said, we do that whether or not anybody is at our house. He said, do you remember, you mean to say that you don't remember a night when y'all didn't have family Bible time? She said, I don't. Now, I understand that you're busy. I understand you have a busy schedule. And in order to do this, what you have to do is to have some flexibility about it. So different nights we're going to do different things. Some nights you're going to have been traveling and you're coming in the van and you're exhausted and you can't hardly see straight. That's a great night to have a singing night. And you go around the van, you say, now everybody gets to pick a song. You pick your favorite song, we'll all sing it together. Right? And then at the end, Daddy will lead a prayer. But we'll do other things too. I think we should play games. If there's small children, take them to the kitchen floor. If there's a checkerboard kind of design in the linoleum or whatever you got, and you can do like Simon says. You know, if you get the answer, I'm going to ask a Bible question, and you do it age appropriate. But if you get the answer right, you get 2 bottom scoots, and whoever gets to me first gets a prize. Now, don't give them a bicycle. I don't mean that, but you could give them something appropriate. You could say, if you get to me first, you get to stay up 5 minutes later than your brother. I do backflips for that, huh? Or maybe you play 20 questions. I'm a character in the Bible. And have a competition between a brother and a sister or whatever. It's what is it? Is it an Old Testament or New Testament? Old Testament. Man or woman? Man. Good or evil? Evil. And let them go with it till what are you doing? Well, we're playing a game. And we're learning the Word of God. Play scripture games. And you say, I'll quote a scripture from the Bible, and you take one of the words out of my verse, and then the next person, you come up with a verse. You quote a verse that has, and it's not so hard. You got the E's and the Th's and the A's and all those little words in there. You could find verses. If you want to make it more challenging, you say, I'm going to quote a verse, and the last word of my verse you've got to use in another verse. All right? So that's kind of challenging. Caleb, we always had prizes. I mean, it was always something very small. And when Caleb was in Freed-Hardeman, he called one night during story time, and I said, Caleb, we're having our story. Can I call you back? He said, well, what are y'all doing? I said, well, we're playing a game. He said, can I play? Sure, you can play. And he's very competitive with his sister. They always were. And so I just put the phone in the center of the table and turned on the speakerphone. And so whatever game we were playing, you know, we went at it, learning whatever we were doing and having fun. And he won. And so congratulations, Caleb, you won. He said, is there a prize? Well, yeah. His mom said, there's a prize. He said, what is it? She said, it's a pair of socks. He said, can you mail them? So that's what she did. She mailed them. But my favorite thing that I want to suggest, and I suppose if there's one thing about this whole lesson that I wanted to put in the minds of young parents and grandparents, it would be this. So if you can only get one thing, get this one. the daddy list. The daddy list. Or, perhaps in your case, it's the granddaddy list. You've got influence over your grandkids. Don't you be wasting that now. You use that productively. I mean, create a plan. This is what I'm going to do to help my grandchildren be successful. And I know what true success is. The daddy list is real simple. You can do it on your laptop or do it on a piece of legal pad paper. It doesn't matter. But I want it to be a document that you keep rather close to you. Keep it at your desk, someplace where you can access it easily, because I want it to be a living document. I want you to be adding things to it as you go along. This is the list at the top. You can put this. What I want to make sure my children or grandchildren know before they grow up and leave me. I hope there are things coming to your mind right now. Well, we're going to put on the list. I want them to know that the world was created by God in 6 literal days. Is that important? I want them to know about the one true church. I want them to know about the necessity of baptism for the remission of sins, and to be able to go through and talk about the different instances of conversion in the book of Acts. I want them to know about how to choose a good wife, how to choose a good husband, right? I want them to know what Jesus taught about marriage, divorce, and remarriage. How early do you think it's too early to teach children that? We need to do it before they notice that there's another gender. I want to teach them the difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament. I want to teach them that there's a heaven and a hell, and what we know about eternity. I want to teach them about the power of the blood of Jesus Christ, and the only thing that will wash away a person's sins is the blood of Jesus. What comes to your mind? I want to teach them about honesty and integrity, and that we always keep our word, and that truth in our house is held to a very high level, because we want to always do the right thing. Now, you're creating the daddy list, or again, the granddaddy list. And so what we're going to do some nights in our story time is to take one of the items on that list, and we're going to talk about that. Now, it may be that there are some things, I'm sure there will be some things which will be done multiple times through the raising of those kids, but imagine a daddy or granddaddy, and if you don't have a daddy or granddaddy who can or will do this, mama or grandmama, and imagine you sitting down and saying, now let's talk about what Jesus said about marriage. Let's talk about that. And then you sit and you pour it out. Look, your kids are not going to get faith by osmosis. You don't catch faith like you catch a cold. You catch faith because parents are very deliberate in how they bring this to you and they instill it in your heart. Right? All right, so the first one is matters of knowledge. I love the way y'all don't have a clock here. Okay, we're doing good. Here's some, I don't know if you can read that, resources. There are various resources that you could access. Here are a couple that I think are good. One of them is it's kind of a shameless advertisement, but Apologetics Press has some great stuff to use for your story time at night, lots of different things, and we've got some things that will be helpful. Oh, terrific. That are on the Colley House website, and you can go and access some of those that will be helpful in your story time. All right, number 2, matters of fidelity. There are 2 areas which I want to suggest to you are very critical to instill in your children's hearts with reference to fidelity that are just not widely taught. But you've got to do it. You've got to put these things in those little pliable hearts. It is fidelity to the Lord's church and fidelity to the family. Let's start with the church. How do you teach that? Well, look, I understand the fact that Christianity is made up of more than just coming to Bible class and worship. I mean, I got that. Christianity is a lifestyle. It is applicable to every facet of our lives. And yet, I would suggest to you that faithful attendance to Bible class and worship is a very tangible way that we teach our children that we put the Lord first. Are you with me? See, I hope, and this is going to sound strange, I guess. I don't know, but I hope that during the rearing of your children, and you have them involved in sports and various academic and extracurricular activities. You got them, and I like all those things. I think that's healthy. Maybe they're in the band, and I think that's terrific. But there are going to be times when things are going to be planned at the same time as Bible class or worship. It was true when I was a kid, and I'm sure it's even more true now. And in your house, I want there to be a policy. We just don't miss worship. We just don't do that. I mean, unless we cannot be there. Well, sir, we don't miss very much. We wouldn't miss for schoolwork, for example, unless it was a very big test. And then we wouldn't miss for sports unless it was a really big game. And I understand the logic behind that, because you're reading through this that by and large we're very faithful to the worship assembly and Bible classes. I mean, here you are, it's Wednesday night, and here you are in Bible study. But I want you to understand that what I just described would be a terrible risk of paving the way for apostasy in your kids, because I can assure you that if I was the devil, I would find that. I mean, when your kids grow up, the challenge to their faith, the challenge to them being faithful to the work of the Lord and the church isn't going to just be about things like a history test. It won't be about a baseball game. It's going to be about big things with big pressures. And I want to ask you the question, so are they going to have the backbone to say, no, wait a minute, I put the Lord first. I appreciate this or this or this and how important that is, but I've got to be anchored in the Lord. I'm going to serve Him faithfully. Your kid's going to grow up that kind of backbone? That will largely depend on the kind of conviction with which you raise them. I want you to think about this. In the raising of kids, there's a difference. In a family, I really appreciate how y'all are listening tonight. You're doing good. You're going to grow up, and you're going to get married. Even some of you old boys, I don't know, maybe you'll find somebody who'll have you. I don't know. But I'm just kidding. But I want you to know that there's a difference in a family with children, and they get ready to go on vacation. And some Christian families reason like this: we're going to go to Florida, we're going to go to wherever they go. And what are you going to do on Sunday? Well, we'll see if we can find us a church. That's one kind of family. There's another kind of family that I want you to be. And it goes like this: where are you going to go on vacation? You're going to go down to Florida. But as soon as we decide where we're going to go, we're going to get online and we're going to figure out where we will worship on Sunday morning and Sunday night and Wednesday night. We're going to figure that out. And we're going to plan our lodging based on where those buildings are. You say, oh, that seems a little strenuous to me. I mean, we're on vacation after all. I don't think... Yeah? I'm just telling you. If your objective is to raise children that don't apostate, that they just stay faithful, it's going to be because you made decisions like this. And there's a difference in those kind of families. I choose to say that we're going to put the Lord first, and in these tangible ways we show them. This is just how we do it in our family, you see. That's what you're saying. Teaching fidelity. Involve your children in spiritual family projects. I understand that you have them involved, and I'm thankful to God. You got them involved in the activities in this great church, and I know that this is a healthy and growing and active church. And so that means that you got kids involved in things. But I want you to do some things that are not attached to any kind of program in the church. That's just your family. Think like this. Think with me. You see, you're raising up your kids. Or if you have your grandchildren here, you're helping to form their moorings. What if you involve them in spiritual family projects? Pick you a missionary. Somebody in India. That won't be hard for you. Somebody in Ukraine. Somebody over in Zambia or in Zimbabwe, over in Africa. Find a faithful man of God teaching the truth, and then adopt him as your spiritual or your family missionary. And so, I don't care how old, if your children are too small to read and write, you could say, well, honey, we're going to send a little money and a letter to Brother Brown in Africa. Now, what would you like to ask him? And let them ask their little questions, and you write them down. And send a picture, and then send them some money. Put some money in there. And let your children put some of their money. Now, it's better if you let them take some money out of their piggy bank or wherever they keep their coins that they're saving. Let them take some of that money. It may not amount to 15, 20 cents or whatever it is, but it's important that it's theirs. That's important. And then send it to Brother Brown. And what will happen is, in a few weeks, you'll get a letter back. Now, I can assure you that Brother Brown's going to really love this. Put a picture in there of your family. And you get this letter back from Brother Brown. Thank you for the money. Thank you for the contribution. And we're going to use that, and that's very helpful. And here are the answers to your questions. And by the way, last week, 2 more precious souls were baptized into Christ. And you watch your children be excited about that. How come? Well, in Alabama, we say, because they've got a dog in this hunt. It's because some of their money went to the support of Brother Brown over in Zimbabwe. He's our missionary, you know. He's our guy. What if you, we're talking about spiritual family projects that are separate apart from the work of the church, the activities, the organized activities. So what if you have a couple of adopted widows? Find you a couple of widows. And on Saturday, take your kids and go do something. We're going to go clean out Sister Jones' gutters today. Well, I think that's good, Daddy. How much are we going to charge her? Nothing. We're going to do it because we love her and because God watches how we take care of our widows. Yeah. You want to raise your kids? You better involve them in these kind of things. When Caleb and Hannah were little and we weren't perfect parents, I can assure you of that. They would assure you of that. But one of the things that we did was we did widow hugging. And what that meant was that every assembly, when we come to the assembly, they would have to find 3 widows each to hug. And my kids were different. And so we'd get back in the van after worship and Cindy would say, Caleb, did you hug your widows? Yes, ma'am. Hannah, did you hug your widows? She said, well, Mama, I could only find 2. Well, that's all right. Next time you can hug 6. That's how we work. What happened is that our children got to where they felt very comfortable around the widows. Incidentally, God made all widows to love children's hugs, all of them. And those widow women, they'd have cricks in their necks, turning their head to see who was going to get that hug, you know, from that child. What I wanted to do is to create a circumstance where my children felt comfortable around people of old age, because that's good for them. Don't you think they need that? And it was good for the church too. It was good for. I never wanted them to be intimidated or nervous around older people. Look, we're talking about fidelity to the Lord's church, but let's move on. Let's talk about fidelity to the family. Are you aware of the fact that people are getting married later in life? Well, sometimes it's just because of personal preference, and there's nothing wrong with that. But as a societal trend, I think it's a little concerning. I mean, sometimes people are marrying late because of feminism. You know, we had 2 or 3 decades of that. And the world kind of got its way about family for a few decades here. And how's that working out for you? Huh? We've changed in America about family. We've changed a lot of things. Changed the definition, haven't we? Changed the way we view mamas and daddies. How's that working out for you? I don't mean that you and I necessarily had any real control. We've got control of our own families. When I was in elementary school, my father was preaching in Oklahoma, so that's where I lived too. And when it came time for Halloween, we'd go, my 2 sisters and I would go trick-or-treating. I have an older sister, 2 years my senior, and one younger who's 2 years my junior. And we were in elementary school. And we'd go trick-or-treating on Halloween, alone. Ever thought a thing about it? Go up and down those streets, thick residential. I don't know. I'm sure my parents said, now you need to be back in an hour and a half. I guess they probably told us a time, but they didn't go with us. I can assure you, you're not going to do that with your children or your great. You wouldn't think of it. School was, I don't know, it was several blocks away. It wasn't uncommon for me to ride my bike to school, weather permitting, by myself. In 3rd grade. Didn't think a thing about it. You probably wouldn't do that. I'm just saying that these decisions that people on the left tout as being so intelligent, such advancements, are from hell. And look how it's turning out. Now look, what we've got to do is to teach our children values reference to the family. I'm talking about fidelity. So people marry later. Sometimes it's because of feminism. Sometimes it's because they don't save sex until marriage. You know, you grow up not appreciating those kinds of values from the Scriptures, and so sometimes they wait for marriage. My papa, he died when I was about 12 or 13. He'd say, the reason that I married your grandmother is that she wouldn't let me kiss her till I married her. And sometimes I think that this generation is marrying later because of divorce, you know, and if kids grow up equating marriage to divorce, why would you want to go through that? Why would you want to do that? And so they don't. Look, daddies, remember that the way your kids spell love is T-I-M-E. Got that? That's it. And Polishing the Pulpit's a great lectureship every year. And one year they had a panel, and Caleb, our son, is a preacher, and we just are so proud of him. But anyway, they had this panel of dads who are preachers and their sons who are preachers. And I don't know how many of us, I guess 6 of each. And they put us, in a line, and everybody had a microphone, and they asked questions of the fathers and of the sons. And so one of the questions for the sons was, what did your father do that most profoundly influenced you growing up? Well, I couldn't wait for that answer. Gave Caleb a microphone, and I thought, this is going to be theologically profound. Well, he didn't hesitate. He said, when I was in 4th grade, every day my father would come home from the office. We lived close to the church building. Come home from the office on his lunch break, and we would shoot baskets, or we would throw the baseball. And we did it every day if the weather was permitting. And we did. I never thought about that as being terribly profound. I just liked to be around the boy. We'd shoot those 3-pointers, and then we'd do trash talk. You were standing on the line. No, I wasn't. That was a 3-pointer. No, it wasn't. And we had so much fun. One day, that little guy, he was in, 3rd or 4th grade, and we were pitching the baseball, and I threw it, and he was looking at a bird, and I beamed him. That thing whacked him right in the noggin, and he said, Daddy, you're not supposed to throw it at me. Well, I don't know where to throw it. We had so much fun. And when he looks back and he thinks about we did so much, but it was the time. I'm telling you, it's the time. Daddies, I challenge you. My 2 children are now grown. I got a couple of grandchildren, which is a wonderful thing. I challenge you to not let those kids grow up and you get to be my age and you have regrets because you didn't spend time with them. You force yourself. And that means that what you got to do is prioritize it. You got to put doing things with that boy and girl ahead of something, because there'll be something trying to take up that time. Mothers, the most controversial thing that I preach is not about the necessity of baptism. The most controversial thing that I preach is in this statement. Ready? Mamas, raise your own babies. Don't farm your children out for somebody else to raise. There is no close second to a mother. Now, you used to know that. You knew it when you were growing up. You say, well, yeah, but grandmothers are different. I had a couple of them myself, and I loved them something awful. And I'm a grandfather now. You know what? Well, Ezra is almost 3, and he's got blazing red hair. And he's just wonderful. Whatever I've got in this world, if he wants it, he can have it. That's how I feel about that boy. Don't ask me later about him, because I'll be telling you for a while. I'm different than his daddy. And Cindy, my wife, is way yonder different than his mother. Grandparents don't discipline like parents do. They don't have the same vision. They don't see the same invisible things like mamas and daddies do. Titus chapter 2 is pretty explicit about this too. I would just say to you that we've got to teach fidelity to our children. We've got a whole generation growing up right now, and one of the main things that's just been sucked out of their lives It's the sense that family is to be valued, deeply, deeply valued. And that we're faithful to the family. I'm gonna take the time to tell you this story. I was on an airplane recently coming back from somewhere up north, and it was a little plane, and I was sitting on the very back seat, the one that won't lean back and sit up kind of straight. Well, the stewardess, the attendant, was on a fold-down seat right beside me, and then a woman on her side over there, and they were from the north. And they're having a conversation about how the people in the South talk funny. Really. I took about as much of that as I could, and I said, I'm from Alabama. Oh, that's nice, they said. That's nice. Have a new grandson. He's 6 months old. Oh, they said, that's nice. We bought him a gun. Oh. I said, you want me to tell you about it? Yes. They had that little quiver in their voice. Well, yes. Well, Ezra is 6 months, and he has 6 living fathers, a dad, 2 granddads, and 3 great-grandfathers, one of whom is 94. So this circumstance of the 6 isn't going to last very long. And his daddy and I spent a good bit of time, and we chose carefully a rifle for that boy. We bought a Henry Golden Boy 22 caliber rifle with an octagon barrel, lever action. Beautiful gun, beautiful gun. Brand new. And every man of the 6 contributed equally to the purchase of that gun. Wasn't cheap. Every man pitched in $100 to buy that rifle. And then we bought a good box of cartridges, and this took some time because they don't live in the same place, but every man on that list shot that gun once. And every man wrote in the book that came with the gun a note to baby Ezra. And then we wrapped that thing up tight and put it in a safe. And unless the Lord returns or something happens to change the plan. Now, you wouldn't give a boy a rifle like that when he's 15. He'll get it on the occasion of his wedding. I hope I get to be the one who gives it to him. And if I am, I'm going to tell him about his great-grandfathers who signed that book. And I'm going to tell him about our values and our family. I'm going to tell him who he is. Now see, we've got to train our children in fidelity to the family. You don't ever make fun of family traditions. There's a value inherent in that. Establish them when they're young. Make them look. My kids they look forward to things that we've done for years that Cindy and I sometimes just accidentally started. But now they're a big deal because our family's a big deal. All right. Matters of discipline. Sometimes parents, they've kind of abandoned don't discipline their children. You ever go to Walmart and you got children that nobody owns? Go kind of wild. Sometimes parents don't discipline. I mean, it's just different reasons. Sometimes they weren't disciplined as children themselves, and so they don't get it. Sometimes it's because they're way yonder on the left in their thinking, and so they just don't want to squash the creative juices of those children, and they don't discipline. Sometimes they don't discipline because we tried that for a while, and it just didn't work out very good, and so we just stopped. When Cindy and I were in college, we had some close friends, and we married about the same time, had our babies about the same time. Our parenting philosophy was completely different. In reference to discipline, their idea was that you should save your no's for the big things. So you wouldn't want to, through the day say, no, don't do that, no, don't do this. You wait till you do something egregious, something big. And then the no will have a lot more effect. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a recipe for disaster. Huh? Good parents are, one of the greatest things you can do for your children is to teach them what no means. And you teach them that as soon as they understand it. Right? Discipline. Now let's make some rules for discipline. I'll just go ahead and tell you, I'm a real advocate of spanking for disciplined children. I think it's a great way of disciplining. It's unpleasant, but it's not going to harm them permanently. And what you say is, that was unpleasant for both of us. Neither of us liked that, but I don't want you to do what you just did ever again. And if you do, well, I've got some more where that came from, right? Discipline. Here's some rules. Number one, don't count to your children. Don't you know what I'm talking about? Honey, pick up your shoes. And she doesn't pick up her shoes. She acts like she's deaf, but she's not. I know she heard me. Well, I don't understand that. And I can tell you right now, it's not about those shoes either. It's about that girl. Honey, pick up your shoes and go put them in the closet. And then what we do sometimes is that she doesn't do it. She ignores the order. And then you say 1, 2, fractions, 2.5, right? And then finally she'll pick him up. The funny thing about that is that tomorrow you're going to be a little bit stressed, a little more nervous, and you won't count then. You're just going to go right to it. How confusing is that? I don't see the point of that. I would suggest to you that when you say, honey, pick up the shoes, what you mean to say by that is, honey, pick up the shoes, right? Don't count to them. Don't yell at them. Now, I'm not talking about if your kids are, your little child is about to go across the interstate and there's a semi coming. Go ahead and yell then. I'm talking about when you're correcting them. You don't want your children to obey you because you're loud and out of control. You want them to obey you because you're mama or your daddy, right? Don't lie to your children. Don't lie to them. And this is true that's applicable to if you tell your boy that on Friday afternoon I'm going to take you fishing at 3 o'clock, you break your neck to get there. You be sure that because your credibility is at stake. But the same thing applies to discipline. If you say to your child, now honey, if you do that again, I will spank you, then you be sure you deliver. Because if you don't, you've wasted an important opportunity to teach obedience. Do you understand that the greatest place that a child grows up learning about obeying God is by learning how to obey mom and daddy? Right? Had a friend in my office one day, a fellow gospel preacher, and he had a small child. I guess she was, 4 or 5. I don't know how she was, but we were in my office, and she was over there looking at my books and touching them. And it didn't bother me because she wasn't hurting them, but it bothered him. And he said, honey, don't touch the books. Leave those alone. And we went and continued our conversation, and she kept on doing what she was doing. And so he noticed, and he said, now I told you not to touch the books, and if you keep doing that, I'm going to spank you. We continued our conversation, and she just continued exactly what she was doing. Now, he was still talking, but I couldn't hear him anymore because I knew something was about to happen. And he turned directly, and he saw her. And this is what he did. He went over there, and he scooped her up in his arms, and he came back, and we continued our conversation, and that was that. And that is the answer to the question. When he first said, don't touch the books, she ignored him. Because that's how he had trained her. He didn't mean to train her that way, but that's what he had done. Don't you lie to those kids. Never, ever lie to them about something good or about something unpleasant. If you say, I'm going to spank you under these conditions, unless you learn mitigating circumstances that you didn't know, you better keep your promise. Keep your promise. I know the bell's going to stop me. Let's do one more. Matters of morals. Now look, we live in a time, and I don't have to explain this to you, where Satan has done his work very, very well. And you're raising your kids, your grandkids, in a time where morality is scoffed at in a way that has never been true in America like it is now. It has never been like this before. And so we're going to be increasingly different. Your children need to know that growing up, that we're not like everybody else. We're never going to be like everybody else. It's because we're Christians, and Christians are unique. But this is on purpose. Teach them morals. Do you know what music they're listening to? Find out. Find out. And get a handle on that. You know what you know what kind of television they watch? Because the television, don't you be playing that TV all the time in your house. I hope you don't do that. But some houses, they just keep it on all the time. And so what happens is that there's garbage coming over there, all sorts of garbage, and they're just not, they kind of zone out, but it's just playing all the time. Are we, that thing's training our children. Train them up this way. It's not wrong to have a television, but when they start talking like this, using this kind of language, foul language, using God's name in vain, we're going to either change the channel right then or we're going to turn it off. And if they start doing things sexually, we're going to do the same thing. Change the channel right then or turn it off. if we're riding in the car and garbage comes on the radio, we're going to change the channel or we're going to turn it off. I bought that TV. I know how to get rid of it, right, if we can't control it. And be sure about your computer devices too. Never, ever let your child have an online computer device in his bedroom at night. I had a class, I heard this statistic one day about the age at which boys in America are first exposed to pornography. 11. 11. And I went to my elders and I said, give me a class of the boys from 10 years old to 14 years old. And I want to teach them about being real men. And so we had a quarter, and I've repeated that class. I'm doing it right now. And one night we talk about pornography. And I just asked them a question: what was the first time you saw pornography? Age 10 to 14, from just stellar families, wonderful, faithful Christian families. And I can tell you, every boy had a story. Your sons and daughters don't have to go looking for pornography. It'll come looking for them. So we're going to make rules. How do you do it? Well, I'm going to know what they're listening to. I'm going to know what they're watching. When they get of age, I'm going to teach about morality, about modest apparel. A daddy came to me recently and he said, he has two lovely Christian daughters, teenagers. He said, Glenn, I teach them about modest apparel, about not dressing immodestly. Things too low, things too tight, things too short, things too, all of those things, and not revealing. And they say, well, where in the Bible does it draw the lines? Where does it say all the, and where are the rules about what is immodest and what's not? He said, Glenn, could you tell me where it is? I said, sure. He's my friend, and so I can tease him. I said, look in the mirror. It's you. What God did was to say, I want women to wear modest apparel, 1 Timothy chapter 2. And so He gave you those girls to raise and that wife to lead. And you're perfect. You love them enough to die for them. And you're a man, so you get it. Listen, daddies, I know the bell's rung. Listen to me. You must hold the honor line about what we say, what kind of language we use, what about our entertainment. The Bible doesn't command you to be entertained. It's okay to be entertained, but make sure that you don't transgress God about how we dress. And when they start dating, make the rules. Make the rules. Girls don't need to be sitting in boys' laps. It's an invitation to promiscuity. Don't go dancing with your boyfriend. He's going crazy already. Oh, so hard to have a girlfriend, and you have to have these restraints until you're married, because that's what the Bible says. Well, let's just go ahead and dance with her. What, are parents crazy or what? Send them to the prom. Why don't we send them to the prom, and let's let that pretty girl dress like and then dance in front of him. While all along we're saying, now, you save yourself for marriage. If you eat your cake today, you'll have a crummy tomorrow. Save yourself for marriage. And let me take your picture while you're dressed like that and you're going to dance in front of your boyfriend. Are we crazy or what? That's crazy. Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Don't hesitate to define true success. It's living your life and going to heaven. And what I want to do with my kids is to raise happy, faithful, productive Christians. You've been very kind. Thank you. God bless you.